Luis Donaldo Colosio Murrieta was a presidential candidate for the Institutional Revolutionary Party who was assassinated in Tijuana during the 1994 presidential election. While at a rally in Lomas Taurinas, Tijuana, a gunman had approached Colosio from the back and shot him in the head and abdomen, where he collapsed and was later rushed to a city hospital after plans to take him to an American hospital across the border were cancelled. And he would eventually succumb to his wounds a few hours later on March 23, 1994. The same day, Mexican authorities had claimed they had arrested the shooter at the site, a then 23-year-old named Mario Alberto Martinez, who from the time he was arrested to today has maintained the story that he acted alone in the assassination. However, a lot of controversy surrounds the official story, as a belief amongst the Mexican population at the time and still to this day is that Colosio's assassination was a massive cover-up, either with multiple shooters at play, involvement of cartel, or a conspiracy within the PRI, which is the most common theory. A few main examples people point to are the appearance of the shooter during and after his arrest were questioned, as the Mexican authorities had shaved, bathed, and given him a prison haircut before showing him to the media, as well as that Colosio's speech was moving away from President Salinas' political agenda to maintain influence during further Mexican administrations. The case was reopened by the Attorney General's office as a new suspect named Jorge Antonio has been identified, who was a part of Colosio's security detail at the time. Evidence presented by the FGR includes blood-stained clothing and witness testimonies placing him at the scene firing a weapon, which they argue was part of an evident criminal cover-up by the former security agency. Freemasonry has existed in Mexico since the late 18th century, brought by French immigrants who settled in the capital, with the first Masonic Lodge of Mexico, Arquitectura Moral, being founded in 1806. Many presidents of Mexico were Freemasons, and it greatly influenced political actions in the early years of the country. During the 19th century, Freemasonry was being heralded as a means of removing the influences of the Catholic Church. Several of the men who were Masons had expressed a desire to free women from the Church's grasp through education and attempted to spread its influence across the country. However, the influence of Freemasonry began to decline due to internal rivalry between the different rites of the movement, the York and Scottish rites, as well as opposition of the Catholic Church, which most of Mexico were believers in. This, along with a lot of infighting like political assassinations and division, weakened the organization's influence, while the Catholic Church's strong anti-Masonic stance created suspicion and hostility towards its members, particularly because many of the lodges were seen as anti-clerical, which was unpopular at the time. Sergio Ramos is a Spanish football player who is regarded as one of the greatest defenders in non-American football history, with him recently being ranked number 1 in his squad for accurate passes, long balls, clearances, and interceptions, as well as his performance in the 2014 Champions League final, where he scored 2 goals in quick succession against Bayern Munich at the Allianz Arena, securing Real Madrid's spot in the final. On February 6, 2025, Ramos was announced as a new player for the Liga MX football team in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, where he was handed the captain's armband on his debut and has since scored 7 goals in 31 appearances, but is set to leave at the end of 2025 as contract renewal talks stalled. El Chupacabra is a legendary cryptid from Latin American folklore which originated in the small town of Moca in Puerto Rico in 1995 and has since spread all across the Americas with reported sightings, stories, and alleged photographs of the creature. El Chupacabra's description seems to vary based on location and specific story, but the most common way it's been described is to be a greenish-gray lizard alien-like creature with scales and a spiny ridge down its back, which has been allegedly responsible for the killing of livestock across the Americas, in which it will suck the blood of entire herds of goats, sheep, and cattle, and has also been described to hop like a kangaroo. In Mexico, the creature has since been widely reported across the country, with one widely cited incident for its existence being an incident that occurred in Amacuaca, Jalisco in 1996, where 16 sheep were found dead and drained of blood. And whether the creature exists or not, reports of bloodless murdered livestock persist, and to date, no predator has ever been caught, though some scientists do contribute some of the Chupacabra killings to be from coyotes, as their puncture wounds look similar to that of the alleged Chupacabra puncture wounds. Nuestra Señora de la Santa Muerte, Saint Death or Holy Death, is a female folk saint and deity in the Santa Muerte religion, which is a new religious movement in Mexico and South America, which originated in Mexico as a privately practiced religion until the early 2000s, when a believer named Enriqueta Romero founded her famous Mexico City shrine in 2001. Santa Muerte is seen as the personification of death and is depicted as a female skeletal figure wearing robes and usually holding either a scythe or a globe. She is associated with healing, protection, financial well-being, and assurance of a path to the afterlife, where people give offerings such as alcohol, cigarettes, or candy to the saint and pray to her for protection or other support. Worship usually involves building a shrine of the saint with an image of the Santa Muerte surrounded by candles, flowers, and incense. According to the belief, Santa Muerte will grant her followers miracles in exchange for their faith and worship of her, such as protection from assaults, accidents, gun violence, and all types of violent death. And despite being condemned by the Catholic Church, the Santa Muerte movement has been steadily growing since the 20th century, with an estimated 10 to 12 million followers globally by 2025. Bermeja Island is an alleged island that existed off the north coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico, according to several maps from the 15th or early 20th centuries. However, several surveys and expeditions to find the alleged island have come up empty, with the island seemingly disappearing despite appearing on several maps of the Gulf of Mexico made by Spanish conquistadors and cartographers during and after the Spanish colonization of the Americas. The island's earliest recorded existence was in 1539 by Alonso de Santa Cruz in El Yucatán e Islas Adyacentes, which was a list of islands of the region published by Madrid, with Alonso describing the island as a small blondish or reddish island. According to a French-Mexican cartographer, British maps around the mid-19th century reported that the island sunk 360 feet below the sea, though this is unconfirmed, and the most commonly accepted theory is that the island never existed and was an error by a cartographer that was copied on several maps throughout the centuries. But other theories suggest that the island did exist and fell under the sea due to rising sea levels, or was destroyed by the CIA to expand the exclusive economic zone. So I couldn't really find a lot of information about this besides a few Twitter posts and Reddit threads. However, according to a few people on Reddit and Twitter apparently, there exists a rumor in Mexico that former Mexican President AMLO, who we mentioned in the previous tiers, used to steal cows, goats, and horses in his adolescence and would essay them, with one Redditor claiming there's even a warrant for his arrest for committing such acts. I couldn't find any proof of this claim, nor could I find a newspaper or arrest warrant, so I'm not entirely sure if this is something that's true or just a weird rumor on Reddit. Dolores Jenny Rivera was an American music artist that was very popular in Mexico due to her being a songwriter and producer in the genres of banda, mariachi, and norteño, which were regional Mexican music genres popular in the country. However, unfortunately, on December 9th, 2012, Jenny would be killed in the 2012 Learjet 25 crash. Around 15 minutes after takeoff, the Learjet 25 private jet that was carrying a total of 5 passengers, including Jenny, suddenly went into a steep descent while climbing towards the assigned cruise level and crashed south of Monterrey, Mexico, killing everyone on board. While the official investigation theorized that the cause of the crash was due to the pilots losing control of the jet while climbing to the cruise level, the tragedy led to many conspiracy theories online that believed the crash may have been intentional, with the most common theory being that Jenny's death was a targeted hit orchestrated by drug cartels, as there have been many rumors perpetuated, with Fox News even coming out with a former story claiming a former attorney for the Belgian Leva cartel claimed he used to contract various artists to perform at cartel parties, with Jenny being one of those artists. The National Company for Popular Subsistence, or CONASUPO, was a Mexican parastatal company established in 1962, whose purpose was to provide food security for the population, particularly the poor, by guaranteeing the purchase of basic commodities from farmers and regulating consumer prices. In 1965, the CONASUPO would also create the Milk Hydration Company, which provided milk to needy people in the urban and rural sectors. However, in 1987, CONASUPO was under fire after 41 tons of powdered milk that was supposedly imported from Ireland and possibly other European sources was contaminated with cesium-137 and strontium-90, which were radioactive chemicals that both environmentalists and government officials claimed was contaminated due to being exposed to the radioactive fallout of the 1986 Chernobyl disaster. However, no proof was really offered for this claim, and the British Embassy in Mexico City denied that the milk came from Ireland. There are conflicting reports about what actually happened to the milk, with CONASUPO claiming it was returned to Ireland and Mexican authorities promising to demand that their purchase of the milk will be reimbursed, but I didn't find any source on what happened to any of the people who unfortunately consumed this milk. Since the late 80s, people have theorized that many high-ranking cartel leaders and associates who were supposedly killed or died had faked their deaths to evade capture from both the authorities and rival cartels. But recently in 2024, this theory has kind of been confirmed as true to an extent, as a prominent cartel leader who was connected to the Jalisco New Generation cartel, named Christian Fernando Gutierrez Ochoa, was found alive and arrested in Riverside, California, in November of 2024 after it was believed that he was killed by the cartel leader El Mencho after kidnapping 2 Mexican Navy men in 2021. Reportedly, what actually happened is El Mencho helped Ochoa fake his death by telling associates he had killed him for lying, allowing him to flee to the United States and live a life of luxury in California. During both the July Monarchy and Second French Empire periods of France, they had intervention in Mexico and attempted invasions of the country that resulted in wars raging between the two countries. Starting in 1832, a complaint was made to King Louis Philippe by a French pastry chef, who claimed that Mexican officers looted his shop in Tacubaya, and according to several sources, the officers refused to pay for the damages. After this and several complaints similar to this, the Prime Minister Louis Mathieu Mola demanded that Mexico pay 600,000 pesos in damages in 1838, which the then President of Mexico, Anastasio Bustamante, refused to pay, leading to the French king ordering a blockade of all Mexican ports on the Gulf of Mexico from the Yucatan to the Rio Grande, as well as to attack the fortress of San Juan de Ulua and to seize the city of Veracruz. After the capture of Veracruz in December 1838, Mexico would declare war on France and would begin the First Franco-Mexican War. The war would see the loss of 345 people in total and would only last for 3 months, as a peace treaty was signed relatively quickly and Mexico agreed to pay the 600,000 pesos in damages to French citizens. 22 years later, in 1861, Mexican President Benito Juarez would place a moratorium on foreign debt payments and expelled all remaining Spanish diplomats and accused the Spanish of supporting conservatives in the 1857 Mexican Civil War, which the Spanish, French, and UK responded to by agreeing debt repayments would be forthcoming. Later, negotiations being made between Mexico and France, agreements between allies broke down as France made it clear they planned on invading Mexico due to their violation of previous treaties. And the Spanish and British basically agreed to deport from Veracruz, which angered the French, so later, on April 16, 1862, the French issued a proclamation inviting Mexicans to join them in establishing a new government, and began an invasion of the country where armed conflict immediately broke out between French and Mexican Republicans. The war saw almost 46,000 people killed in total, and came to an end with the execution of Emperor Maximilian in June 1867, and the restoration of the Mexican Republic under President Benito Juarez, and after Napoleon III withdrew his troops in 1866, leaving Maximilian and his imperial forces vulnerable to the Republican army. Andrea Amare Liarzi is the name of a supposed murder victim, whose name began circulating online with a story relating to her death sometime in 2020. From the earliest post I could find that mentions her name, though the story could have originated earlier. The story usually goes that Liarzi was a journalist from Sonora whose body was found naked in the courtyard of a primary school in Tampico, with clear signs of torture. The story is most likely fabricated, as no credible evidence from any news sources, official records, or any other sources reported any murder or a victim with that name in those exact circumstances. So from what I gathered, this is most likely an online urban legend in the Mexican horror community. The revolutionary Mexicanist action, the Golden Shirts or Los Dorados, was a Mexican fascist, secular, anti-Semitic, anti-communist, and ultranationalist paramilitary organization whose main goal was to expel Jews, Chinese, and communist immigrants from Mexico, being formed on March 10, 1934. During the start of 1920s in Mexico, racism and xenophobia began to boom due to an influx in Chinese, Jewish, and communist immigrants, and economic concerns among the Mexican working and middle class began to grow because of this, resulting in several organizations, along with governmental discriminatory action being taken mostly against the Chinese and Jewish community in Mexico, whose businesses were boycotted as they had come to become a part of a considerable portion of the merchant class. During all of this, the Golden Shirts, who originally were veteran soldiers for Pancho Villa during the Mexican Revolution, formed their organization in the 30s within the pro-race committee of the federal district and began action against immigrants while also stating that, quote, their struggle was not an offensive against foreigners, but rather a defense of national interests, with them even getting support from the Nazi Party in Germany. Despite this, the Golden Shirts engaged in several violent attacks against both foreigners and the police, prompting their organization to be disbanded, and their leader, Nicolas Rodriguez Carrasco, was arrested for promoting inter-labor conflicts and was set to be expelled from the country in 1936. While it is true that Mexican drug lords and cartel members do try and evade authorities by fleeing to several different countries, mostly the United States and Canada, the most I could find on this was a 2015 news article about Argentina being on high alert after they received a tip that El Chapo may be hiding there. Obviously, El Chapo was actually caught in Sinaloa and extradited to the United States. However, I don't doubt that some cartel members may have escaped to Argentina, and this entry likely is similar to the theory of many historical figures escaping to Argentina. Jose Vasconcelos Calderon was a Mexican writer and politician who was very influential in the politics of Mexico between the early 1910s to the late 1950s, and was also known for his role in the Mexican Revolution against Porfirio Diaz. During the revolution, Jose joined several movements such as the Youth Athenaeum and Anti-Re-Election Club, which opposed Diaz, and later supported the movement to oust Diaz in 1910 headed by Francisco Madero. And Jose also opposed both the military regime of Victoriano Huerta and the presidency of Plutarco Calles. However, while Jose was known for progressive educational reforms and his philosophical concept of the cosmic race, his political views shifted towards a pro-fascist, anti-American stance, and in 1940, El Timón magazine was published by the Nazi embassy in Mexico, containing pro-fascist propaganda, and was supported by Nazi Germany, which was mainly written by Jose. El Timón contained sentiments that the Mexican people should remain neutral in World War II and should oppose the United States' influence, along with the support and praise of Mustache Man and the NSDAP's development of Germany. The Tlatelolco Treaty is an international treaty signed on February 14, 1967 by 33 countries as of 2025, which aim to denuclearize Latin America and the Caribbean and create a nuclear arms-free zone in the regions due to the rising threat of the ongoing Cold War. The treaty was first proposed by Mexican President Adolfo Mateos and several diplomats including Alfonso Garcia Robles, who won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1982 for his efforts in the treaty. Following the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, COPRADOL was created, which was a temporary commission body to draft the text of the treaty. The United Nations Assembly authorized COPRADOL on November 27, 1963, and following this, several sessions took place between 1965 to 1967, with the treaty being officially signed by 13 countries in February of 1967. Carlos Salinas de Gortari is a former Mexican president who served as the 60th president between 1988 and 1994, who before, during, and after his time leaving office, has been criticized and accused of multiple types of corruption, including electoral fraud and general corruption scandals, and causing a surge of political violence across the country, often being criticized by the Mexican left due to being seen as an illegitimate president whose neoliberal policies led to higher unemployment and were perceived as giving away the wealth of the nation to foreign ownership. However, an even darker story lies in his childhood. When Salinas was 3 years old in 1951, an old news story that has since been mostly ignored and scrubbed off the internet featured a story about the future president shooting and killing their 12-year-old family maid while playing soldiers in war with his younger brother and another boy. With no charges ever being filed, though it was never fully determined or mentioned if Salinas pulled the trigger or not. And apparently the TV series Narcos Mexico even depicted the incident in its second season. La Luz del Mundo, or the Light of the World, is a non-Trinitarian Christian denomination based in Guadalajara, Mexico, and founded in 1926, that has since been under heavy criticism and scrutiny due to accusations being brought against the church leaders for creating a cult of personality and sexually abusing members, with one of the leaders, Nason Joaquin Garcia, being arrested in Los Angeles for sex crimes by the California Department of Justice on June 8, 2022. On May 18, 1997, a group of women appeared in Televisa and gave an account of how they were abused by one of the three leaders, Samuel Joaquin Flores, 20 years earlier in 1977, with even a former member coming out to accuse Flores of abusing him too as a teenager, and 4 people later filed complaints with the state prosecutor, but due to the statute of limitations, the leaders couldn't be charged for the crimes detailed. Due to this, only Garcia was ever arrested, which included a history between 2015 and 2018 of human trafficking, the production of child pornography, and the essay of a minor, where he was denied bail and later sentenced to 17 years in prison on 23 felony charges.